May 27, 1942. Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, Japan. The morning fog drifts low over the docks. Beneath the rising hum of engines, a row of officers stands beneath a massive rising sun flag, its fabric trembling in the salt air. The Imperial Japanese Navy's carrier fleet is preparing to sail: Akagi, Kaga, Sōryū, and Hiryū. 4 giants of war, bound for the Central Pacific. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo steps out from his staff tent, his white gloves immaculate, his expression carved from discipline and pride. He watches the flight crews load torpedoes onto Nakajima B-5N Kate bombers, their metal glinting in the pale light. Around him, engineers and flight officers exchange final calculations for fuel and timing. The upcoming operation, code-named MI, will strike a dagger into the American heart. The island called Midway Atoll. Across the command table inside the tent, Commander Minoru Genda, the fleet's chief tactician, spreads a series of maps under his hand. Red lines sweep eastward toward Midway, converging with an arrow marked Decisive Battle. Genda turns to Nagumo, his tone sharp with certainty. "Our pilots are the eyes of the Empire," he says. "We need no other eyes." The other eyes he's referring to are mechanical, an imported curiosity from Europe and America: radar. Months earlier, engineers at the Yokosuka Research Arsenal had demonstrated a primitive radar set capable of detecting aircraft at 50 miles. The signal was weak, unreliable in rain, and expensive. When naval officers proposed deploying it aboard carriers, one admiral laughed outright. "We already see farther than the Americans," he said. "We have the best eyes in the sky." So radar was shelved, relegated to experimental use on shore stations in Japan. Now, as the fleet steams east into the open Pacific, those same officers carry their confidence like armor. Their aircraft have shattered Pearl Harbor, sunk British battleships, and swept across the Pacific in less than 6 months. The Imperial Navy sees itself as unstoppable. But 2,500 miles away, in a control room aboard the USS Yorktown, a small group of American sailors is listening to the airwaves. Through a technology the Japanese dismissed as science fiction. The CXAM radar hums faintly in the darkness of the Yorktown's Combat Information Center. Circular screens glow with faint green light. Blips appear and vanish like ghostly echoes. A radar operator, Seaman First Class Robert Bobby Crane, adjusts a dial and calls out, "Bearing 240, range 75 miles, possible incoming aircraft." Above him, red lamps swing with the rhythm of the ship, illuminating faces that have not seen daylight in hours. Commander Miles Browning, Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher's operations officer, leans over the display. "You sure about that, son?" "Yes, sir. Signal's faint, but it's there. Too fast for weather." Browning turns to a communications officer. "Get that to the bridge. Wake the Admiral." And just like that, before a single enemy scout has sighted the American fleet, the U.S. carriers already know. Someone is coming. Out on the ocean, as the wind howls across Nagumo's flagship, the Akagi, there is no such hum, no green glow, no warning. Only the endless gray horizon and the illusion of control. Japan's finest fleet is sailing blind. June 4th, 1942. 04:30 hours, Midway Atoll. The sky is still black, the air heavy with salt and engine exhaust. On the small speck of coral known as Midway, U.S. Navy radar operators peer into glowing scopes inside a concrete bunker. Sweat drips from their necks, pooling under headphones that hum with static. The radar set, SCR-270, a crude, finicky machine the size of a small truck, crackles to life. A faint blip appears, then another. The operator, Sergeant Joe Ackerman, frowns and adjusts the frequency knob. The echo sharpens into a definite arc, moving toward the island. "Sir, I think we've got something. Bearing 320, range about 150 miles. His commanding officer, Lieutenant Sanderson, leans in, voice taut. "Confirm that, that's not weather." Outside, the first rays of dawn turn the horizon silver. The Pacific seems endless, calm, deceptive. But in that moment, American radar has pierced through the stillness and found death on the way. Over 200 miles to the northwest, the first carrier strike force, Kido Butai, cuts through the sea. 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Sōryū, and Hiryū, steam in tight formation, their decks already buzzing with aircraft. Admiral Nagumo stands on Akagi's bridge, binoculars raised, as the first wave of Aichi D-3A Val dive bombers and Nakajima Kate torpedo planes roar into the morning air. He has no radar, no distant warning, only the word of his scout planes and the blue horizon. The irony is cruel. Japan, master of the carrier strike, blind to what lies beyond sight. On Midway, sirens scream, ground crews sprint across the airfield, pulling tarps from Grumman F-4F Wildcats and Douglas SBD Dauntlesses. Pilots scramble from tents, boots half-laced, clutching helmets. The order goes out. Enemy inbound. Prepare to launch interceptors. Inside the radar bunker, the signal strengthens. Multiple contacts now, big formation, looks like bombers. By Aero 555, the radar operators have tracked the enemy long before the Japanese scouts even spot Midway's coastline. Fighter groups are in the air, intercepting the incoming wave head-on. The Americans are still outnumbered, but they are not surprised. And out at sea, aboard Task Force 17, Admiral Fletcher and Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance receive the first radar plots from Midway's base. In the Combat Information Center of the USS Yorktown, technicians overlay the radar data on a map table. The blips converge toward Midway, and another group, faint but distinct, appears moving southward. Browning leans over the plot. That's them, the carriers. They're coming from the northwest. Fletcher nods. Launch everything we've got. The flight decks explode into motion. On the Yorktown, SBD Dauntlesses and TBD Devastators line up under the rising sun. Mechanics pull chocks, signalmen wave paddles, and pilots throttle forward. The air is thick with noise. Engines, propellers, shouted commands. One dauntless crewman mutters to his pilot, "How the hell did we find them this early?" "Radar, kid. The new stuff. They can't hide anymore." Miles away, on the bridge of the Akagi, Nagumo still believes the Americans are reeling from Pearl Harbor, unprepared for an ambush. His confidence is absolute. The sea looks empty. Then, at 0605, a lookout shouts, "Enemy planes approaching from the east." Nagumo's head snaps toward the horizon. Tiny black specks glint in the morning sun. "How is this possible?" he demands. "We were not sighted." But the Americans have already seen him, hours ago, through invisible eyes. As the first bombs begin to fall over Midway's airfield, the stage is set. Japan's fleet, once the hunter, has become the hunted, not through luck, but through technology it had dismissed as Western toys. The laughter that once echoed in Yokosuka now vanishes beneath the thunder of radar-guided vengeance. June 4th, 1942, 0930 hours north of Midway. The sky above the Pacific is chaos. Smoke, cloud, and sunlight blur into a single vast maelstrom of movement. The air smells of oil and cordite. Below, 4 Japanese carriers cut a clean V through the waves, the Akagi, Kaga, Sōryū, and Hiryū. Their decks swarming with aircraft, preparing for a second strike on Midway. On Akagi's bridge, Admiral Nagumo studies a fresh reconnaissance report brought by courier. The news is unnerving. Enemy fleet sighted, bearing northeast. He frowns. Impossible, he murmurs. His staff exchange wary glances. Commander Genda steps forward. Perhaps a cruiser group, sir. Not the carriers. We were not detected, Nagumo insists. Our scouts saw nothing. They cannot know where we are. But they do. 200 miles away. American radar aboard the USS Enterprise has tracked returning Japanese bombers, their flight path betraying the position of the carriers that launched them. It's the invisible thread, connecting sky and sea. Information Japan cannot see, but the U.S. now wields like a weapon. Inside the Enterprise's Combat Information Center, Lieutenant John Ford, a radar officer barely 23, points to the scope. A faint green cluster flickers, moving steadily. They're there, sir. Just under 200 miles, closing south-southwest. Admiral Raymond Spruance nods. Then that's our shot. Launch immediately. Below deck, the hangars thunder to life. Deck crews pull SBD Dauntless dive bombers into line. Mechanics refuel engines that still tick from the morning heat. Pilots climb into cockpits, faces streaked with sweat and grease. On the bridge, an officer glances at his watch. It's a long shot, Admiral. Spruance doesn't look up. Midway was a long shot. So was Pearl Harbor. Now it's our turn. At 9:32, the Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown launch a combined strike force, 117 aircraft in total. Guided not by sight, not by scouts, but by radar bearings and radio triangulation. It's a first in naval history. A carrier strike coordinated through electronic eyes. As the dauntless squadrons climb into the sky, the sea below shrinks to a sheet of silver. Lieutenant Dick Best, leading Enterprise's VB-6 squadron, checks his compass, then the sun's position. The coordinates don't match the expected visual sighting. He trusts the radar plot anyway. We go east another 15 miles, he radios. They're there. I can feel it. At 10:20 hours, they find them. 4 carriers spread out beneath the clouds, perfect formation, deck crews wheeling armed planes for takeoff. Best dives first. The wind screams past his canopy as he locks onto the Kaga's flight deck. The crosshairs align. He releases the bomb at 1,500 feet. Direct hit. The deck erupts in fire. Fuel lines, torpedoes, and munitions ignite in a chain of explosions that tear the ship apart. Minutes later, Sōryū and Akagi follow, struck in quick succession by dauntless squadrons that descended like ghosts from the sun. Back on Akagi's bridge, Nagumo stands frozen, his command burning around him. His flagship lists violently to port as flames crawl up the mast. He grips the railing, disbelief clouding his face. How did they find us? He whispers. They could not have known. But they did. Because while Japan still fought with courage and instinct, America now fought with data. Radar, crude, flickering, imperfect, had given them the most precious commodity in war: time. By 10:45, 3 of Japan's carriers are burning wrecks. The 4th, Hiryū, retaliates in desperation, launching a final strike that cripples the Yorktown. But it's too late. The battle's outcome is sealed. When word reaches Tokyo days later, Japan's high command is stunned. How could their invincible fleet fall in a single day? At the Yokosuka Research Lab, a junior engineer stands before a dusty radar prototype. The machine hums softly in the corner, ignored for months. He runs his hand along its cold metal casing and murmurs, "They saw us before we saw them." For the Imperial Navy, Midway is more than defeat. It is the moment the Empire realizes the battlefield has changed. Courage alone no longer wins wars. The invisible waves of radar, the same ones they mocked, have turned the tide of the Pacific. June 5th, 1942. The Pacific dawn. The horizon burns with a faint glow of oil fires still drifting from the wreckage of Akagi, Kaga, and Sōryū. Black columns rise into the sky like funeral pyres. The sea itself seems to mourn, slick with fuel, dotted with debris, and eerily silent except for the occasional pop of trapped air escaping from twisted hulls below. Aboard the surviving carrier, Hiryū, Admiral Yamaguchi Taman stands on the flight deck, his uniform damp with sweat and smoke. Around him, sailors drag scorched bomb fragments away from the deck, their faces pale beneath streaks of grime. He gazes at the eastern sky, where the first hint of sunrise glows above the horizon. "We will strike again," he says quietly. "We must." But he knows the truth. They are blind. Every reconnaissance plane sent north and east has failed to return. Without radar, the Hiryū's view of the world ends at the horizon. The Americans could be anywhere, above, below, beyond. Inside the ship's combat information room, officers hunch over outdated maps. Their only instruments, binoculars, voice tubes, and dead reckoning. The air smells of ink and sweat. A young ensign wipes his glasses, trying to steady his voice. "Admiral, no contact reports since 0400. "Continue searching," Yamaguchi replies. "We fight until the last." Miles away, aboard the USS Enterprise, the mood is tense but controlled. The ship rocks gently on calm seas. Below deck, radar operators monitor faint signals dancing across their scopes. Lieutenant John Ford adjusts his set, marking a returning echo. Small, fast-moving, likely aircraft. "Contact, bearing 180, low altitude, might be stragglers from Hiryū." On the flight deck above, F-4F Wildcats roar into the air, their pilots guided entirely by that flickering radar plot, unseen, unheard, invisible to the Japanese. Within an hour, they find the Hiryū. The carrier is steaming north at full speed, a wounded giant still defiant. Her deck crew frantically readies the last 6 operational aircraft. Then, the bombers arrive. At 0830, American dive bombers from the Enterprise and Hornet descend through the cloud cover in perfect unison. A precision strike coordinated through radar and radio. Their shadows pass over the deck just seconds before the first bombs fall. The explosions rip through the ship's midsection, hurling steel and flame into the sky. Men tumble into the ocean, their cries drowned by the roar of the inferno. Flames engulf the flight deck within minutes. Yamaguchi refuses to abandon ship. He turns to his executive officer. "Go, save yourself. The Empire still needs men like you." The officer hesitates. "Sir, you must..." "No. A commander must die with his fleet." At 10:58 hours, the Hiryū detonates, her ammunition stores erupting in a massive fireball. The last of Japan's 4 carriers sinks beneath the waves. The battle that began with radar warnings at dawn now ends with a sea of burning steel. The Imperial Navy, once the most powerful carrier force on Earth, has been shattered beyond repair. Later that day, aboard the USS Yorktown, damage control crews battle flames of their own. The Yorktown, hit twice by Japanese counterstrikes, lists dangerously, yet the spirit aboard remains unbroken. On the bridge, Admiral Fletcher, exhausted and soot-stained, watches smoke rising on the horizon. "They didn't see it coming," he mutters. "Not one of them." Nearby, a communications officer nods, staring at the radar scope, the same faint green glow that had guided them to victory. "It's strange, sir. We didn't win with numbers, just with knowing." Fletcher doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. Tokyo, June 6, 1942. In the Naval Ministry, officers file into a conference room thick with cigarette smoke. The atmosphere is heavy, the silence worse. Charts line the walls, all red arrows and empty sea. A senior officer clears his throat. All 4 carriers lost, air crews nearly all gone. Another officer, younger, leans forward. Sir, had we deployed radar on our ships? Perhaps. Enough, snaps the admiral. It is done. But even he cannot hide the tremor in his voice. For the first time, the Imperial Navy must face what its arrogance refused to see. Modern war is no longer fought by sight alone. Outside, the cicadas cry in the humid Tokyo air. The Empire's sun still shines, but dimmer now, shadowed by its own blindness. June 7th, 1942. Midway Lagoon. American sailors stand on the deck of the Enterprise, watching oil fires still flicker on the horizon. The sea smells of salt and smoke. In the radio room, a telegraph taps out the coded message to Pearl Harbor. Tactical victory complete. Enemy carriers destroyed. Midway secure. One sailor, barely 19, stares at the radar console, the same green scope that had pulsed through the night. He whispers under his breath, "Guess it really did blind them." For the first time since Pearl Harbor, the United States holds the upper hand in the Pacific. The Japanese commanders who once laughed at radar never see the next blow coming, because radar has changed everything. It has turned invisibility into vision, chaos into control, and war itself into something new. The Pacific will burn for 3 more years, but the balance of power has shifted forever. And as the smoke over Midway thins into the morning light, one truth becomes clear. The future of warfare will belong not to those who fight hardest, but to those who see first.